Welcome, Masha Gessen, to my show.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It's very up-to-date, your book, before the book we were going to discuss today, and that is The Man Without a Face. It's about Putin, and I think nobody has come so close and been analyzing him so well as you do in this book.
Thank you.
But you also said that he's not going to stay very long in power.
Well, fortunately, I didn't say it in this book, which is good. But yeah, there was a sense when I was promoting the book, which was 2 years ago, and the Russian protest movement was at its height. I had this very optimistic sense that things were changing. Unfortunately, I was right about the fact that things were changing, but I was wrong about the direction in which they were changing. He responded to the protest movement in the way that is the most effective way for a dictator to respond to a protest movement, which is with a crackdown. And in large part, the new book is about that. It's about the way the crackdown works, how it started, and what it looks like now. So I think it's still the last stage of his rule, but it's a very bloody and probably a very long stage.
The whole world was taken by surprise. And I don't know, what do you think, how would you analyze this that happened with the Crimea?
Well, to be honest, I didn't think it was very surprising. It was shocking without being surprising, which is a major difference. Because if you look at the way that Putin has been behaving over the years that he's been in power, it's perfectly consistent. He has consistently violated and ignored and mocked international law, and he has consistently gotten away with it. In 2008, he bit off a piece of Georgia. The European Union, as embodied by President Sarkozy, went to Russia and put its stamp of approval on it. So why shouldn't he be able to bite off a piece of Ukraine in exactly the same way?
So do you think he will advance in this direction? It's a very tense situation now in Ukraine and other, countries around Russia.
Yes, I think he will advance in this direction. He will not necessarily advance into Ukraine. It's very difficult what he's going to do because he doesn't know himself what he's going to do.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, he doesn't have a plan. He acts on the basis of opportunity, and he acts very reactively.
So how would you, who knows, when I read this book, The Man Without a Face, it's like he's living in a bubble, inside a bubble, not knowing what's happening outside. How would you describe that he's just acting without having a plan?
Well, there's a difference between having a mission and having a plan. He feels that he has a mission. The mission has become very well articulated in the last year or so. It's a civilizational mission to build Russia up as the traditional values capital of the world, to become the center of resistance to Western tolerance, to reclaim what he believes are traditional Russian lands. That's a mission. That's not a plan. There isn't a step 2 that comes after step 1. If he sees an opportunity, he'll take an opportunity. Crimea was an opportunity. There's no way that he knew even a week before he invaded Crimea that that's what he was going to do, because he didn't know that the protesters were going to win in Ukraine. But once that happened, first of all, his fear was great, that this was a portent of things to come in Russia. Second of all, his anger was great, because he felt like his own thing, his own Ukraine is being taken away from him. And third, he saw an opportunity. There was no way Ukraine was going to resist, and there's no way that the world is going to stop him.
When you put that title, A Man Without a Face, what did you mean for people who hasn't read the book?
Right. Well, people who haven't read the book should read the book.
I know, but maybe we can get them to read it when we talk about it.
What I describe, actually, in some detail in the book is how he came to be president and what happened.
He was nobody.
He was not exactly nobody. He had worked in the KGB his entire life. So he didn't have a public record. He didn't have a public face. He got to create his own public face as he became president, which is very unusual. I think it's the only time in the history, certainly in recent history and for the world, that has happened. But also what I meant was that he was handpicked by President Yeltsin, who at the time in 1999 felt embattled, felt like he had no one to turn to, had a very real and well-founded fear that if the opposition came to power after he was gone, he would be prosecuted. So he needed to find somebody who he thought he could manipulate and somebody who could guarantee him immunity from prosecution. He was right about the immunity, he wasn't right about the manipulation. But he was picking out from a lineup of faceless bureaucrats, and he picked Putin.
It is an interesting book. So, but let's
Thank
talk
you.
about this book,
Let's.
because they are as up to date, this book as well, because they goes like hand in hand, those two books. It's about Pussy Riot. The whole world learned about Pussy Riots, but you have gone into their lives. These young women, who are they, and why did they do what they did?
Well, Pussy Riot is a fictional group. It's actually a protest art collective that sometimes performs as a fictional punk band called Pussy Riot. They stage guerrilla performances that are anti-Putin, anti-consumerism, and feminist. So two of those things are extremely unusual in Russia, and one is just unusual.
And very provoked.
Very confrontational, and the point of, this is not unique to them. The point of doing protest art is to push the boundaries, including the boundaries of protest.
We see them in action in this footage.
Right. This is an action that they staged in Sochi during the Olympics. And this is amazing because this is their first action after Nadia and Maria, two women who were sentenced to 2 years in prison, were out of jail. And I think it really shows exactly what they do incredibly well, which is show what's wrong with the country. I mean, this violence, this spectacular, in every sense of the word, violence, is something that is probably one of the most dangerous things going on in Russia right now. This is exactly what LGBT people are facing. This is what women are facing. This is what any kind of protester is facing. This is anybody on whom it's open season is facing.
But they also shows the weakness of Russia, of the regime. Young women dressed without any weapon, without anything, dressed like almost girls, are beaten up like that, doing nothing from our point of view.
Well, I don't know if that demonstrates a weakness. I mean, I think that, when we tell ourselves that, or we tell our kids that the bully is picking on them because of his own weakness, that's comforting, but it has no useful implications.
I mean, it means that Putin is so provoked by these young women, so he has to, go so far.
Either that, or it means that the country so strongly relies on aggression that any kind of transgression is necessarily met by violence, and that is just the Russian norm right now.
Before we go into these women, who they are and their personalities, you lived in Russia, and you were also your situation became more dangerous than it would have been before.
Well, the irony of my situation was that I was an opposition journalist for many, many years, well known, blacklisted by the Kremlin. And I wasn't in much danger. I mean, I was occasionally harassed, but things got really scary when the anti-gay campaign began, because I've always been openly gay, and I've also been open about the fact that I have a family. And about a little less than a year ago, I started getting direct threats to me and especially to my family.
And you have adopted as your oldest son?
Yes, we have 3 children, my partner and I, the oldest of whom is adopted. The politicians made it very clear that they were going to go after all of our children, but especially the oldest son who is adopted. So we actually had to send him out of the country first. He left Russia in June of last year, and then we followed in December.
The situation for Pussy Riot, the members of Pussy Riot, could you describe that now?
Well, if we're talking about danger, I think they're in danger. I mean, they are physically attacked on a regular basis. Pretty much once a week, there's the story of an attack on them. It's very clear that they're being attacked by young men who believe that they're doing their patriotic duty by attacking them. They wear this patriotic insignia that signifies Russia's victory in World War II. So it's very much state-inspired, but not state-controlled violence. And I think that the biggest danger facing them right now is not even going back to jail. It's being victims of extreme violence.
So they are very, very brave in what they are doing. How long will do you think they will, been doing this? Because it's really dangerous what they are doing.
Well, they're not going to stop.
So, and there are coming others after them?
I'm sorry?
Are there coming others taking over if they go to jail?
No, no, they're unique. I mean, they are, in fact, I think they're sort of the first dissidents of the Putin era. And what I mean by that is outstanding individual actors who act on behalf of other individuals by giving voice to them, by publicizing their plight and attracting enough attention to them to save them, basically. Because what they've been doing since they came out of jail in late December is working on prisoners' rights. That's their biggest issue right now. And they have been attracting attention to individual cases of abuse in Russian prisons. So in that particular mold, there isn't somebody else who takes your place. They have unique access to world media. They have a unique voice of moral authority. And I'm afraid that the regime is quite aware of the fact that if they're silenced, there won't be somebody else who will have that kind of access and that kind of voice.
What do people in Russia think about him?
Well, people in Russia fall into two categories. One is most of the country, about probably 98% of the country, which gets its information from state television, which has been controlled by the state since 2001. So that's a whole generation of people who've never seen an alternative point of view. They think that they're hooligans who went into a church and defecated. And then there's a very small minority of people who get their information from the dwindling and just incredibly shrinking, almost into non-existence, independent media, who I think often have complicated emotions about them because they're not necessarily comfortable with how far they push the boundaries of protest, but are terrified and outraged by the way that the regime has treated them.
What will happen, do you think?
What will happen to Nadia and Maria?
To them, yeah.
I don't want to make predictions.
Are they protected by the attention they have gotten in the world?
I think they're protected to an extent from going to jail or at least from being killed in jail. I think that the attention that they got during the trial kept their sentences relatively short because other peaceful protesters that we have seen sentenced since then have gotten much longer sentences of 2.5, 3, 4 years. So I think the world's attention also kept them alive in prison, although they face some fairly dangerous situations. But the world's attention cannot save them from thugs, and that's what I'm most worried about, are these young men who think that they will be heroes if they do something to these women.
And there are so many others that are in danger right now. Being a homosexual today in Russia is really to live a dangerous life.
Yes, and I think that's a very good point, that the anti-gay legislation that has received a lot of attention in the West is actually a very small part of a large campaign, the point of which is to incite violence. And that's been its biggest effect, is people getting attacked in the streets, people getting attacked during protests, people getting attacked in gay and lesbian gathering places. It is truly dangerous to just be a gay or lesbian person in Russia.
Thank you so much for coming here, and I think those two books are so important because when you read this, you don't believe that this is happening so close to our country right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much.